Hello everyone. Now you're going to hear a short recap of the film Austin Powers, The Spy Who Seduced Me. Enjoy watching. Austin Powers is an international undercover agent who was frozen in 1967 and thawed out in the 90s to fight his enemy, Dr. Evil. Once, having dealt with him, Austin spent his honeymoon with his beautiful wife, but suddenly she started jamming, and the remote control turned out to be not for the TV, but for his wife. She was not a human, but a cyborg who had machine guns embedded in her chest. It was a gift from Dr. Evil, a kamikaze bride. But Austin was not particularly upset that she exploded, because now he was single. At the NATO base, a military man turned on a TV show in which Scott Evil complained about his father, the head of a worldwide villainous organization. He was supposed to be somewhere in the Earth's orbit, cryogenically frozen, but he was actually in the studio at that very moment. Generally, his dad did not like him because Scott was not evil enough. The episode ended with the Doctor viciously attacking a member of the Ku Klux Klan and later the host. Austin Powers got a job from his boss to go to a photo shoot. One of the models worked for Dr. Evil. Her name was Ivana Humpalot. Powers worked with fashion models like a true professional. Dr. Evil's lair was located at Starbucks headquarters. The company was acquired by Number 2 while the ringleader was frozen. Also during this time, Frau Farbissina took a mistress, but the news did not end there. While the evil doctor was frozen, his minions tried to make a clone of their leader, and he turned out to be his exact copy, only 8 times smaller. Breathtaking, replied Dr. Evil. Then Dr. Evil would call him Mini-Me. The midget refused to eat the pie, but he would eat the cat. Scott was rude to his father, and Mini-Me was about to finish him off, but Farbissina drove him away with a spray gun. The supervillain deduced that Powers defeated him because he had mojo, that is, a powerful libido. Dr. Evil was going to go back in time with the help of a time machine and take his mojo. If there is such a machine, you can go back in time and whack Austin Powers in the toilet, said Scott. But of course no one would listen to Scott. Austin Powers was frozen in 67. Dr. Evil would be transported to the year 69 when the spy would be defenseless. Along with the clone, he jumped into the device. In the past, a young and fit Number 2 was already waiting for him. Frau Farbissina also looked fresh. The hideout for the boss was of course built in the crater of a volcano. Meanwhile, in 99, Ivana invited Powers to play chess in order to seduce him and then kill him. But Austin Powers turned out to be too hot for her, and instead of killing him, she decided to give herself to him. The villains would get close to Powers with the help of their agent at the Department of Defense. This was an evil Scottish guard called Fat Bastard. He was known for his explosive temper and for weighing as much as a ton. He had just been given the task of being vigilant. A spy had crept into their ranks. As soon as the boss left, the Fat Bastard sprayed sleeping gas from his bagpipes and then drilled a hole in the chamber of the frozen Powers in the area of the testicles, and sucked out his mojo. Agent Powers immediately felt it in 99. The loss of mojo was also confirmed by tests. Basil presented Powers with their version of a time machine with which he would also be able to return to 69. Once the agent accelerated, he jumped back in time and immediately found himself in his flat, and he immediately began to dance, as expected. From the second floor, a blonde woman noticed Powers and went down to dance with him. But she found a competitor who seemed to be working for Dr. Evil, and so it turned out, she distracted the agent when the killer threw a knife from behind, but herself got hit by it. The killer took out a machine gun, but the villainess again absorbed all the bullets into herself. Shoot him with a bazooka, shoot him, said the villainess. But the rocket was again taken by Madam. Together with the agent, they flew out of the window and Powers used her body one last time. You can't win, Powers, said the villainess. Why are you still alive? Replied Powers. Powers fled from the gun firing in a car with a blonde agent named Felicia. Another killer followed them, but Felicia sent his car into the abyss with just one shot. Mustafa survived and was now giving out information about Dr. Evil. He hated being asked 3 times, so he always told the truth the 3rd time. To keep Mustafa from giving away where Dr. Evil's lair is, Mini-Me killed him from a baby pram. The supervillain's base shook. Everyone thought it was a volcanic eruption, but it was from the fat guy who brought Austin Powers' mojo in a flask. Mini-Me brought him the payment in a large case. The fat one loved to eat children, so he demanded that the small one immediately climb into his belly. He was even ready to give up the money just to get this bald baby. Dr. Evil drank the mojo straight from the flask and immediately turned into a real macho. Since only Frau Farbissina was nearby, it was she who fell under his spell. Austin Powers looked into the cryo chamber and took some pictures of himself. Afterwards, he went for a walk with Felicia and together they mocked the royal guard. Powers decided to conquer his new girlfriend with his groovy dance. Although Frau and the doctor promised each other that there would be no difficulties, the office romance did not do them any good. And then it turned out that Farbissina had a delay in her period. Suddenly, Scott arrived in 1969, but his father didn't need him. He already had an evil and overbearing heir who fitted in storage bins. Austin Powers brought Felicia to his den. He also found out where his mojo had gone. The girl agent asked him for his world-famous massage, and then goes on the attack, but alas, the super spy's libido was at 0 and he ran away. Basil asked Felicia not to get close to Austin Powers and gave her the task of tracking down the fat bastard and attaching a tracker to him, at all costs. Therefore, the agent gave herself up to the nasty fat man that very night, though he was much more interested in the drumstick than the blonde. The glutton turned away from her to take more grub, but then she realized that she needed to seize the moment and planted a tracker right in the fat bastard's arse. Dr. Evil's villainous plan was to place a laser on the moon and use it to destroy Washington. Number 2 wanted to make a suggestion, but the boss used a ball to show him who was in charge, bringing the one-eyed man to tears. Austin Powers had found Felicia and explained to her why he ran away the previous night. She bragged about planting a beacon on the fat bastard. The signal led them to a railway station, but it turned out that the fat bastard had just taken a dump and thereby dropped the beacon. The poor military man's eyes were watery. "But you can't flush it off, you need to take a sample for an analysis of his stool," exclaimed Felicia. The can of stool was now next to the coffee, and it soon ended up in Powers' cup. Basil reported that the analysis revealed traces of a rare vegetable that only grew on one island in the Caribbean Sea, which meant that Dr. Evil's base was located there. "The coffee smells like shit," said Powers. "This is shit," replied Basil. "It is with grated nuts," said Powers. Number 2 complained that Mini-Me bites. "It's his teething," replied Dr. Evil. The supervillain contacted the president and threatened that in 12 hours he would destroy the city of Washington with a laser, which at that time was being humped by Mini-Me. This is what would happen to every city unless he got paid $100 billion. Such a request only caused laughter. "It was 1969 and the world didn't have that kind of money," replied the president. To scare and show how the laser roughly works, Dr. Evil included footage of the explosion of the White House from the film Independence Day. Meanwhile, Powers and Felicia had sailed up to the island in a yellow submarine. Dr. Evil was singing songs about the destruction of the world along with his small copy. Scott came running and complained that Mini-Me slipped a dead skunk into his bed. Dr. Evil wanted to reprimand the clone, but he could not, he was such a cutie. The agents had set up camp and were preparing for their mission in a tent. They were surrounded by the minions, but because of the play of shadows, the minions observed a strange picture. A rope and an umbrella coming out of the famous agent's arse, a pile of smoke poured out of the agent's arse, and even a rat appeared. About the arse, by the way, it was convenient to open beer. Dr. Evil was informed that Powers was on the island. He casually decided to rap about how worthless his son was and how cool his Mini-Me clone was. After watching the perverts in the tent, the minions finally detained them and brought them to the main villain. Powers just found out that Felicia slept with the fat bastard. "I am a sexy eagle, and you are a log." Dr. Evil was going to take Powers' mojo with him to the moon. Scott complained that Daddy would again put the agent back in the cell with the stupid guard and he would escape easily. In response, Mini-Me drew a picture of his brother, wishing him dead. The bald ones in the spacesuit were ready to go to the moon, but Frau Farbissina was taking too long with the countdown. A rocket that looked like a huge penis flew out of the mouth of the volcano. The special agents found themselves in a chamber with lava and the floor was gradually moving apart. Powers decided to sort things out, but Felicia justified herself by saying that she was just following orders. He would have done the same, said Felicia. Oh well, it's time to get out, replied Powers. The girl had a plan to neutralize the guard. She showed him her breasts. The hypnotized blockhead went to her and fell right into the lava. On the lunar base, Dr. Evil gave out orders to his minions, how can Washington be destroyed? To stop him, the super agents were also sent to the satellite. The laser was set up and the evil doctor was ready to blackmail the president. Mini-Me's chair broke and he flew up to the ceiling. He had to then be taken down with a pole. If something were to happen to the clone, the villain would of course be upset for 10 minutes and then make a new one. The British agents reached the moon and broke into the base. Mini-Me pounced on Powers and began to pile on him. He punched him in the face, cut him, broke his face and gouged out his eyes. Afterwards, the midget pretended to settle and brought the agents glasses, but it was just a trick. Powers freaked out and punched the little guy against a pipe, but immediately regretted it. However, this was again a trick. The little guy gnawed on his balls and the agent then banged his head on everything. In the end, the maggot climbed into Powers' suit and slithered from the inside. Powers secured him at the arse level and peed in the space toilet so Mini-Me flew off into space. The super spy pointed a gun at Dr. Evil, but Dr. Evil offered him a choice, to save the world or the girl. The minions shot at Austin with machine guns, but he killed everyone with a pistol. He then knocked out Frau and the laser shot past Earth. During this time, Felicia was killed by the poison gas. When Dr. Evil ran away, he was shot in the leg. He managed to trick Powers in the head until Farbissina crept up behind him. The agent went back and jumped into the time machine to travel 10 minutes back and prevent Felicia from dying. Both the world and the girl can now be saved. However, it was important to save the mojo as well, which Dr. Evil threw up in the air. It was a pity that the two powers collided in flight and the flask broke, but there was no time to be upset, especially since Felicia assured her partner that he would succeed with her without this mojo. One of the powers returned to its own time. In 10 seconds everything would explode. The only way to escape was to also jump into the time machine. Together, the couple went straight to 1999, but it was too soon to relax. The fat one hid as a courier and broke in to kill them. Felicia asked the Scotsman if he was happy. Sure, he replied, he was rich and sexy as hell, when really, he wasn't. He was so fat that he hadn't seen his dick in 2 years. He ate because he was not happy, and he was unhappy because he ate. Even though the fat had eased his soul, he would still kill them. For this, he got kicked in the balls by Felicia, which caused a small earthquake when he fell. All the enemies were then definitely defeated and then they danced. Meanwhile, in '69, Mini-Me was caught and given a flu shot in the arse by Daddy to keep him from getting sick after being in the cold space. Austin Powers will pay for this, said Dr. Evil.